Ryan Carter stood on the bridge of the SS Horizon, his eyes fixed on the swirling gas giant outside the viewport. Epsilon 7 loomed large, its deep blue and gold bands glowing faintly in the dim light of the distant sun. The ship had been orbiting, its smallest moon, for hours now, scanning the surface for signs of anything unusual. So far they'd found nothing but rocks, dust, and the occasional crater left behind by ancient meteor strikes. But something had drawn them here, a signal that didn't match any known frequency, something artificial. "Anything yet?" Ryan asked, turning to Lieutenant Laura Hayes, who was seated at the sensor station. Her fingers danced across the controls as she adjusted the scan parameters. "Still working on it, Captain," she replied without looking up. "Whatever's down there, it's buried deep. If I didn't know better, I'd say someone went to a lot of trouble to hide it." Ryan frowned. That wasn't exactly reassuring. He glanced over at Chief Engineer Daniel Brooks, who leaned against the wall near the main console, arms crossed. Daniel raised an eyebrow, but said nothing. The tension aboard the Horizon had been building ever since they received their orders from Central Command. Orders that felt vague, almost rushed. Ryan couldn't shake the feeling that they were being sent into danger without all the facts. "Captain," Laura said suddenly, snapping him out of his thoughts. "I think I've got something. There's a structure about 2 kilometers below the surface. It's old, really old, but it matches the design of those old Terran Republic outposts we used to build during the early days of colonization." Ryan straightened. "The ones abandoned after the collapse?" She nodded. "That's right. And if this reading is accurate, it hasn't been touched in decades. The collapse." Just hearing the word made Ryan uneasy. It was one of those events everyone knew about but no one talked about openly. 30 years ago, the White Star Fleet, the pride of the Terra Republic's military, had vanished without explanation. Entire squadrons disappeared in a matter of days, leaving behind only rumors and conspiracy theories. Some said it was sabotage, others claimed alien interference. Whatever the truth was, it had shaken the Republic to its core. Even now, people whispered about it in hushed tones. "All right," Ryan said, making up his mind. "We're going down. There. Prep a shuttle. Take a team with you. Minimum personnel. Let's see what we're dealing with before we call this in." Laura hesitated. "Sir, shouldn't we wait for backup? This could be dangerous." "And what if whoever or whatever is down there decides to leave before we get reinforcements?" Ryan countered. "No, we need to move fast. Besides, we don't even know if Central Command will send anyone. Not after..." He trailed off, not wanting to voice his suspicions aloud. Laura nodded reluctantly. "Understood, Captain." An hour later, Ryan stepped off the shuttle onto the barren surface of the moon. The ground beneath his boots was cold and brittle, covered in fine gray dust that sparkled faintly under the weak sunlight. Behind him, Laura carried a portable scanner, while Daniel lugged a toolkit filled with tools designed for repairing just about anything. Bringing up the rear was Samantha, Sam Lewis, the ship's medic. She adjusted the strap of her medical bag and gave Ryan a tight smile. "You sure about this, Captain?" Sam asked, her breath misting in the freezing air. "This place gives me the creeps." Ryan chuckled dryly. "You and me both, Doc. But orders are orders." They moved quickly, following the coordinates Laura had pinpointed earlier. As they approached the site, the ground began to slope downward, revealing jagged fissures where the soil had collapsed inward. At the bottom of the slope, they found the entrance to the outpost, a heavy metal door partially buried under debris. Rust streaked its surface, and the once bright insignia of the Terran Republic was barely visible. "This is it," Laura said softly, running a hand over the corroded emblem. "Looks like nobody's been here in years." Daniel knelt beside the door, examining the locking mechanism. "Good news is it's still powered. Bad news is it's locked tight. Gonna take some time to crack it open." Ryan gestured for Sam to keep watch while he helped Daniel force the door open. After several tense minutes of prying and cursing, the hinges groaned, and the door creaked inward. A blast of stale, metallic-smelling air hit them as they stepped inside. The interior was dark, lit only by the faint glow of emergency lights embedded in the ceiling. Dust coated every surface, and the floor was littered with broken equipment and scattered papers. The walls bore scorch marks, evidence of some kind of violent struggle long past. Ryan shone his flashlight around the room, taking in the scene. Looks like whoever was here didn't leave willingly, he muttered. Laura moved to a nearby terminal, brushing away layers of grime to reveal the control panel underneath. She tapped a few keys, frowning as static filled the screen. Systems are fried, but there might still be data stored locally. Give me a minute. As she worked, Sam wandered over to a pile of discarded belongings stacked in the corner. Among them were personal items, photographs, dog tags, journals, all left behind in haste. She picked up one of the journals, flipping through its brittle pages. These poor bastards, she murmured, showing the others a faded photograph of a smiling family. They never stood a chance. Ryan clenched his jaw, forcing himself to focus. Stay sharp, everyone. We're not alone here. Just then, Laura let out a sharp gasp. Got something, she exclaimed, pointing to the screen. Lines of text scrolled rapidly, too fast to read. It's encrypted, but I can decipher parts of it. Looks like logs from the final days of the outpost. What do they say? Ryan asked, stepping closer. Laura hesitated, her expression growing darker. It's not good. According to these files, the collapse wasn't an accident. Someone within the Republic orchestrated it from the inside. The words hung in the air like a death sentence. Ryan felt a chill run down his spine. Are you sure? I'm piecing it together, Laura replied, her voice trembling slightly. But it looks like they were experimenting with alien tech they weren't ready for. When things went wrong, they covered it up by destroying the fleet. Before anyone could respond, a sudden burst of static erupted from their comms devices. Ryan instinctively reached for his earpiece, trying to filter out the noise. Then, faintly, amidst the distortion, came a sound, a voice, barely audible, calling for help. Did you hear that? Sam whispered, gripping her rifle tightly. Ryan nodded, his heart pounding. Distress signal, it's coming from deeper inside. Without another word, the team pressed onward, following the haunting echoes into the shadows of the ruined outpost. None of them noticed the faint glow emanating from a crack in the wall behind them, or the way the temperature dropped several degrees as they passed. The deeper they ventured into the outpost, the more oppressive the atmosphere became. The air was thick with dust, and every step stirred up clouds that made breathing uncomfortable despite their filters. Laura led the way, her scanner in hand, while Ryan kept a close eye on their surroundings. Daniel followed closely behind, muttering under his breath about how outdated the outpost's infrastructure was. Sam brought up the rear, her rifle at the ready, scanning the shadows for any sign of movement. The narrow corridors twisted and turned unpredictably as though designed to confuse intruders. Flickering emergency lights cast long, jagged shadows along the walls, making it hard to tell what was real and what wasn't. Every so often, they passed rooms filled with broken furniture or rusted equipment, remnants of a life abandoned decades ago. It felt like walking through a graveyard, each room holding secrets of those who had once lived and died here. Still getting that signal? Ryan asked quietly, his voice barely above a whisper. Laura nodded, her eyes glued to the scanner. It's stronger now. We're close. Ryan glanced over his shoulder at Sam, who gave him a tight smile. She didn't look reassured, but then, again, neither did he. This place was wrong, too quiet, too still. Even the static from their comms devices seemed louder than it should be, buzzing faintly in the background like an unwelcome reminder of how isolated they were. Finally, they reached a large chamber at the end of one of the corridors. The doors were sealed shut, but the faint hum of power emanated from within. Daniel knelt beside the control panel, examining it carefully. Looks like whoever locked this door didn't want anyone getting in or out, he said, pulling out his toolkit. While Daniel worked, Ryan stepped closer to the doors, pressing his ear against the cold metal. For a moment he thought he heard something, a soft scraping sound like claws dragging across the floor. He froze, his hand instinctively reaching for his sidearm. But when nothing happened, he shook his head, chalking it up to nerves. "This thing is ancient," Daniel muttered, prying open the access panel. "Whoever built this must have been desperate if they thought this would hold up." "Desperate people do desperate things," Ryan replied grimly. "Just get it open." A few tense minutes later, the doors groaned and slid apart, revealing a dimly lit room beyond. Inside, rows of storage crates lined the walls, many of them overturned or smashed open. In the center of the room stood a massive object covered by a tarp, its shape distorted but unmistakably unnatural. Strange symbols etched into the floor surrounded it, glowing faintly with an eerie blue light. "What the hell is that?" Sam whispered, lowering her rifle slightly. "I don't know," Ryan admitted, stepping cautiously forward. "But I don't like it." Laura approached the object first, her curiosity outweighing her caution. She pulled back the tarp, revealing a smooth, metallic surface that seemed to shimmer in the low light. The artifact was roughly cylindrical, taller than a person, and covered in intricate patterns that shifted subtly as she moved around it. At its base, wires snaked out like roots, connecting it to the floor. "Some kind of machine," Laura said, running her fingers lightly over the surface. "Feels warm." Daniel joined her, inspecting the wiring. "This isn't human tech. Not entirely, anyway. Look at these circuits. They're organic. Like they grew instead of being manufactured." Before anyone could respond, the artifact let out a low hum, growing louder by the second. The blue symbols on the floor pulsed brighter, casting strange shadows across the walls. Ryan raised his weapon, his instincts screaming at him to leave. But before he could order the team to retreat, the hum stopped abruptly, leaving an unsettling silence in its wake. Then, from somewhere deep within the artifact came a sound, a faint rhythmic tapping, almost like a heartbeat. "Is it alive?" Sam asked, her voice trembling. "I don't think we should stick around to find out," Ryan said firmly, backing away. "We need to—" He was cut off by a sudden movement in the corner of the room. A shadow darted past them, too fast to identify. Everyone spun toward the source, weapons raised, but there was nothing there. "Did you see that?" Laura asked, her voice rising in panic. "Stay calm," Ryan ordered, though his own pulse was racing. "Whatever it is, it's playing with us." Another flicker of movement caught his eye, this time near the doorway. Before he could react, the lights in the room flickered violently, plunging them into near darkness. The artifact's glow intensified, bathing the room in an otherworldly light. The symbols on the floor began to shift, rearranging themselves into new patterns that seemed to writhe and twist like living things. "We need to get out of here," Sam shouted, gripping her rifle tightly. "No argument here," Daniel replied, already heading for the exit. But as they moved, the door slammed shut with a deafening clang, trapping them inside. Ryan cursed under his breath, trying to pry the doors open with brute force, but they wouldn't budge. Meanwhile, the artifact's hum returned, louder and more insistent than before. Laura stared at it, transfixed, as the symbols on the floor began to rise, forming a barrier between them and the rest of the room. "It's reacting to us," she said, her voice barely audible over the noise, "to our presence." "Well, tell it to stop," Ryan snapped, his frustration mounting. "We don't have time for this." As if in response, the artifact emitted a sharp burst of energy that sent everyone stumbling backward. When the light faded, the room looked different. The walls seemed closer, the air heavier, and in the corners, shapes began to form, shadowy figures that watched them silently, their forms indistinct but undeniably hostile. "Okay, this officially qualifies as bad," Daniel muttered, clutching his toolkit like a weapon. Ryan took a deep breath, forcing himself to focus. "Listen to me. Whatever this thing is, it's dangerous. We need to disable it, or at least figure out how to shut it down." "Laura, can you—" "I'm trying," she interrupted, frantically typing commands into her scanner. "But it's not responding to anything I do. It's like it's learning." The artifact pulsed again, and the shadows around them shifted, moving closer. One of them lunged suddenly, swiping at Sam, who barely managed to dodge in time. She fired a shot blindly into the darkness, the sound echoing loudly in the confined space. "Enough of this!" Ryan yelled, firing his own weapon at the artifact. The bullets ricocheted harmlessly off its surface, leaving no marks. "Think, damn it, there has to be a way to stop it." Laura's hands trembled as she continued working. "Wait, I think I found something. If I can amplify the signal from my scanner, maybe I can overload its systems." "Do it," Ryan ordered. "Everyone else cover her." Sam and Daniel formed a protective circle around Laura, keeping their weapons trained on the encroaching shadows. The artifact's hum grew louder, almost deafening, as Laura adjusted the settings on her scanner. Beads of sweat rolled down her forehead as she concentrated, her fingers flying across the controls. Finally, she pressed a button, and the scanner emitted a high-pitched whine. The artifact shuddered, its surface rippling like water. The symbols on the floor dimmed and the shadows retreated, dissolving into nothingness. For a moment, there was silence. Then, with a final defiant pulse, the artifact went dark. "That did it?" Daniel asked hesitantly, lowering his toolkit. "I think so," Laura replied, exhaling sharply. "But I don't know how long it'll stay offline." Ryan nodded, grimly. "Good work. Now let's get the hell out of here before it wakes up again." They hurried toward the doors, which opened reluctantly after several kicks from Ryan. As they spilled back into the corridor, none of them noticed the faint glow emanating from the artifact once more, or the way the shadows seemed to linger just a little longer than they should have. The team stumbled out of the chamber, their breaths ragged and their nerves frayed. Ryan led the way, his weapons still drawn, as they retraced their steps through the narrow corridors of the outpost. Behind them, the artifact's glow had faded, but the oppressive feeling lingered like a weight pressing down on their shoulders. None of them spoke. They were too focused on putting distance between themselves and whatever nightmare they'd just escaped. Laura walked in silence, her mind racing. She couldn't stop thinking about what she'd seen. The shifting symbols, the organic circuits, the way the artifact seemed almost alive. It wasn't just alien technology. It was something far more advanced than anything humanity had ever encountered, and it was dangerous. Every instinct told her to leave it buried, forgotten, never to be touched again. But deep down, she knew that wouldn't happen. If someone else found it, if the wrong people got their hands on it, the consequences could be catastrophic. "Captain," Laura said finally, breaking the tense quiet, "we can't let anyone else find that thing." Ryan glanced over his shoulder at her, his expression grim. "You think I don't know that? We'll report it to Central Command as soon as we're back on the horizon. Let them decide what to do next." "And if they send someone else?" Laura pressed. "What if they try to study it? Or worse, use it?" Ryan didn't answer right away. He wanted to reassure her, to tell her everything would be fine, but he couldn't shake the gnawing doubt in the back of his mind. Central Command hadn't been entirely forthcoming about why they were sent here in the first place. Something about this mission felt off, like they were being used as pawns in a larger game. Still, there wasn't much they could do about it now. "We'll cross that bridge when we come to it," Ryan said finally. "For now, let's just focus on getting out of here in one piece." They continued moving quickly, their footsteps echoing loudly in the empty halls. The outpost was eerily silent except for the occasional groan of metal settling under the weight of time. Every so often, Sam would pause to check behind them, her eyes darting nervously into the shadows. Daniel muttered under his breath about how unstable the structure felt, warning everyone to stay alert for collapsing floors or falling debris. After what felt like hours, they reached the entrance where they'd left the shuttle. Relief washed over them as they stepped outside, greeted by the cold, sterile air of the moon's surface. The sky above was dark, dotted with stars that seemed impossibly distant. For a moment, they simply stood there, catching their breath and taking in the sight of open space after the claustrophobic confines of the outpost. But their relief was short-lived. As they approached the shuttle, Laura's scanner began to beep, erratically. She frowned, checking the readings. "There's something wrong," she said, holding up the device. I'm picking up residual energy like the artifact's signal is spreading. What does that mean? Sam asked, her grip tightening on her rifle. It means we might not have contained it, Laura replied grimly. Whatever we did, back there, it may have activated something else. Before anyone could respond, the ground beneath their feet trembled slightly. At first it was subtle, a faint vibration that made the dust shift, but it quickly grew stronger. Cracks began to form in the rocky terrain, radiating outward from the direction of the outpost. Move! Ryan shouted, urging the team toward the shuttle. They sprinted across the uneven surface, dodging falling rocks and chunks of debris as the tremors intensified. Behind them, the entrance to the outpost collapsed in a cloud of dust and rubble, sealing off whatever horrors lay inside. When they reached the shuttle, Daniel wasted no time climbing aboard and starting the engines. Ryan helped Laura and Sam inside before taking his seat in the cockpit. As the shuttle lifted off, they looked down at the moon's surface through the viewport. What they saw chilled them to the bone. Beneath the layer of dust and rock, strange veins of blue light had begun to spread, pulsing rhythmically like a heartbeat. The entire area around the outpost was glowing now, and the tremors showed no signs of stopping. Whatever they'd awakened, it wasn't confined to the artifact anymore. Back aboard the SS Horizon, the crew worked quickly to secure the ship and prepare for departure. The data Laura had collected from the outpost was transferred to the main computer, where she and Ryan reviewed it together in the briefing room. The encrypted logs painted a horrifying picture. Decades ago, during the early days of the Terran Republic's expansion, scientists had discovered fragments of alien technology scattered across remote moons and planets. Desperate to gain an edge over rival factions, they began experimenting with these artifacts, attempting to harness their power without fully understanding the risks. They were reckless, Laura said, shaking her head as she read through the files. They didn't care about safety protocols, all they cared about was results. And when things went wrong, Ryan added bitterly, they covered it up by destroying the fleet and abandoning anyone who knew too much. The logs also revealed something else, something even more disturbing. The artifact they'd found wasn't just a relic of those experiments. It was part of a network, connected to other installations scattered throughout the galaxy. Each one served as a node, feeding energy into some kind of central hub. If the artifact on the moon had been activated, it was possible others had been triggered as well. We need to warn Central Command, Laura insisted. If this spreads— No, Ryan interrupted firmly. Not yet. Laura stared at him, stunned. What are you talking about? This isn't something we can keep quiet. And what if they already know? Ryan countered. What if this whole mission was a setup? Think about it, Laura. Why send us here without backup? Why give us vague orders and expect us to handle it alone? Laura opened her mouth to argue but hesitated. Deep down, she knew he was right. Something about this mission hadn't added up from the start. The lack of clear objectives, the rushed departure, the secrecy, it all pointed to someone higher up pulling strings. If we tell them what we've found, Ryan continued, we risk giving whoever's behind this exactly what they want. Until we know who we're dealing with, we keep this information to ourselves. Laura nodded reluctantly. Then what do we do? We analyze the data, Ryan said. Find out everything we can about these artifacts and their connection to the collapse. Once we understand what we're up against, we'll figure out our next move. Later that night, as the Horizon drifted silently through space, Sam sat alone in the medical bay, staring at the wall. Her hands shook slightly as she replayed the events of the day in her mind. She'd always known their job came with risks, but nothing could have prepared her for what they'd faced on that moon. The shadows, the artifact, the sense of being watched. It was enough to make anyone question their sanity. She wasn't the only one struggling. In the engine room, Daniel tinkered aimlessly with tools, unable to focus on anything for more than a few minutes. Laura spent hours poring over the logs, searching for answers but finding only more questions. And Ryan locked himself in his quarters, staring out at the endless expanse of stars, wondering how far the conspiracy went, and whether they'd truly escaped whatever force had awakened below. Unbeknownst to any of them, the artifacts Influence hadn't disappeared completely. Deep within the ship's systems, faint traces of its energy pulsed quietly, undetected by even the most advanced sensors. It waited patiently, biding its time, until the moment was right to strike again. The SS Horizon drifted silently through the void, its engines humming softly as it carried its crew farther away from the moon and the horrors they'd left behind. But aboard the ship, the tension was far from gone. Everyone moved cautiously, their minds replaying the events of the past hours that had shaken them to their core. The artifact, the shadows, the strange energy. It all felt like a nightmare they couldn't wake up from. And though they tried to convince themselves they were safe, something about the mission still didn't sit right. Ryan Carter paced back and forth in his quarters, unable to shake the feeling that they were being watched. He glanced at the viewport, where stars stretched endlessly into the blackness, but he found no comfort in their cold, distant light. His thoughts kept returning to the encrypted logs and the truth they revealed. The collapse wasn't an accident. It was orchestrated by someone within the Terran Republic, a betrayal so deep it made him question everything he thought he knew about the organization he served. He wanted to trust Central Command, to believe they would handle this situation responsibly. But the more he thought about it, the more he doubted their intentions. Why send such a small team on a mission like this? Why withhold critical information? Something bigger was at play here, and Ryan couldn't ignore the possibility that they'd been sent in blind, as expendable pawns in a game they didn't fully understand. Meanwhile, Laura Hayes sat in the lab, surrounded by monitors displaying fragments of data recovered from the outpost. Her eyes were bloodshot, her hands trembling slightly as she scrolled through lines of code and fragmented logs. She hadn't slept since they returned to the ship, unwilling to step away from her work until she understood what they were dealing with. Each new discovery only raised more questions. "Laura," Daniel Brooks said, poking his head into the room. "You need to take a break. You've been at this for hours." She waved him off without looking up. "I'm fine. Just give me a few more minutes." Daniel sighed and stepped inside, leaning against the wall. "You're not fine. None of us are. What happened down there? It's messing with everyone. Even Ryan looks like he hasn't slept in days." "I can't stop," Laura replied sharply. "If I don't figure out how this thing works, if I don't find a way to contain it, we're all in danger." Daniel hesitated, unsure how to respond. Finally, he said, "You think whatever's happening is tied to the collapse, don't you?" Laura nodded slowly. "It's not just tied to it, it caused it. That artifact wasn't some random piece of alien tech. It's part of a network, feeding energy into something much larger, something powerful enough to destroy entire fleets. And now it's active again," Daniel finished grimly, "which means whoever set this whole thing in motion might already know we're onto them." Laura froze, the weight of his words sinking in. If their enemies, or even their own superiors, knew what they'd uncovered, the Horizon could become a target. They weren't safe, not yet. On the other side of the ship, Sam Lewis sat alone in the medical bay, staring at the empty bed in front of her. Normally, this room was filled with purpose, bandaging wounds, administering treatments, keeping the crew healthy. But tonight it felt hollow. She couldn't stop thinking about the shadows they'd seen on the moon, the way they seemed alive, almost intelligent. Were they real, or had the artifact played tricks on their minds? Her thoughts were interrupted by a soft knock at the door. She looked up to see Ryan standing there, his face pale and drawn. "Can I come in?" he asked. Sam nodded, gesturing for him to sit. "You look like hell, Captain." Ryan chuckled dryly. "Feel like it too." They sat in silence for a moment before Ryan spoke. "I need your advice, Sam. As a medic, you've seen people under stress. How do you tell when someone's cracking?" Sam frowned, sensing the gravity of his question. "Why? Who are you worried about?" "Everyone," Ryan admitted. "Laura's working herself to exhaustion in the lab. Daniel's snapping at anyone who gets too close. Even you haven't been yourself since we got back." "It's called trauma, Captain," Sam said bluntly. "We went through something none of us were prepared for. It's going to take time to process." "But we don't have time," Ryan countered. "If we're right, if this artifact is Connected to the collapse, we might not get another chance to stop whatever's coming. Sam studied him carefully, noting the desperation in his voice. Then maybe you should focus less on the artifact and more on the crew. You can't fight whatever's out there if you're falling apart in here. Ryan nodded slowly, realizing she was right. As much as he wanted to dive headfirst into solving the mystery, he couldn't afford to lose sight of the people depending on him. Without them, they didn't stand a chance. Hours later, alarms blared throughout the ship, jolting everyone awake. Ryan sprinted to the bridge, where Daniel was frantically typing commands into the console. "What's going on?" Ryan demanded. "We've got movement outside," Daniel replied, pointing to the viewport. "Something's following us." Ryan squinted into the darkness, searching for any sign of life. At first, he saw nothing but empty space. Then, faint shapes began to emerge. Dozens of sleek, insect-like drones hovering near the ship. Their surfaces shimmered with an iridescent glow, making them look almost organic. "They're scanning us," Laura said, rushing onto the bridge. "I've never seen anything like them. They're using the same energy signature as the artifact." "Are they hostile?" Ryan asked. Before anyone could answer, one of the drones darted toward the ship, attaching itself to the hull with a metallic clang. Within seconds, dozens more followed suit, swarming the horizon like locusts. "They're breaching the outer compartments," Daniel shouted, pulling up a schematic of the ship. Red warning lights flashed across multiple sections. "They're targeting specific systems," Laura added, analyzing the data. "Life support, navigation, communications. They're trying to disable us." Ryan clenched his fists, his mind racing. "Divert power to internal defenses. Seal off affected areas. We can't let them get inside." As orders were relayed to the crew, chaos erupted aboard the Horizon. Engineers scrambled to reinforce bulkheads while others worked to repel the drones. In the engine room, sparks flew as technicians struggled to keep vital systems online. Despite their efforts, the drones proved relentless, bypassing physical barriers with ease and infiltrating deeper into the ship. One drone cornered Laura in the lab, its glowing eyes locking onto her scanner. She backed away slowly, clutching a makeshift EMP device she'd been working on earlier. When the drone lunged, she activated the device, sending a surge of energy through the room. The drone collapsed, its body twitching before going still. Breathing heavily, Laura examined the remains. "They're definitely tied to the artifact," she muttered. "But why are they after us?" Back on the bridge, Ryan coordinated the defense effort, his voice steady despite the mounting pressure. "Report," he ordered. "Drones are retreating. From the engine room," Daniel replied. "But they've taken out 2/3 of our communication array. We won't be able to send a distress signal." "Not that we'd want to," Ryan muttered under his breath. With unknown forces potentially watching their every move, calling for help could make things worse. Suddenly, the ship shuddered violently as another wave of drones latched onto the hull. Alarms screamed louder than ever, and the lights flickered, ominously. "We're losing stability," Daniel shouted. "If they breach the main reactor, they won't," Ryan interrupted firmly. "Laura, did you capture one of those things?" "Yes," Laura replied over the comms. "I'm analyzing it now. Give me 5 minutes." "You've got 3, Ryan said. "Daniel, prep the self-destruct sequence. If they get inside, we blow the ship." Daniel stared at him, horrified. "Captain, are you sure?" "I'm not letting them use this ship to track down the artifact," Ryan replied grimly. "Do it." As the countdown began, Laura worked feverishly to decipher the drone's programming. Its circuits pulsed with the same eerie blue light as the artifact, confirming her suspicions. These machines were extensions of the network, searching for something, or someone, aboard the Horizon. Finally, she found it, a vulnerability in the drone's design. "I can disable them remotely," she announced, her voice crackling over the comms. "But I'll need access to the main computer." "Get to the bridge," Ryan ordered. "Daniel, cover her." With seconds to spare, Laura reached the bridge and plugged her device into the console. Lines of code scrolled rapidly across the screen as she uploaded a virus designed to disrupt the drone's connection to the artifact. Outside, the swarm faltered, their movements growing sluggish before they detached from the hull and drifted away. For a moment there was silence. Then slowly, the ship's systems began to stabilize. "Well," Daniel said, breaking the tension. "That was fun." Ryan exhaled sharply, running a hand through his hair. "Don't celebrate yet. Whatever sent those drones knows we're onto them. Next time they won't be so easy to stop." As the horizon limped forward, battered but intact, the crew gathered in the briefing room to assess the damage. Laura shared her findings. The drones were created using the same alien technology as the artifact, but they weren't autonomous. They were controlled by something or someone else. "If we want to end this," Laura said, "we need to find the source of the signal. Wherever it's coming from, that's where the real threat lies." Ryan nodded, his jaw tightening. "Then that's where we're headed, but we do it on our terms, not theirs." The SS Horizon drifted through space, its battered hull a testament to the battle it had barely survived. Inside, the crew worked tirelessly to repair the damage caused by the swarm of drones. Sparks flew in the engine room as Daniel Brooks welded torn panels back into place. Laura Hayes pored over data logs in the lab, trying to understand how the drones had infiltrated the ship so easily. Sam Lewis tended to minor injuries sustained during the chaos, though her hands still trembled slightly as she bandaged cuts and bruises, and Ryan Carter stood on the bridge staring out at the endless void, his mind racing with questions he couldn't answer. They had survived, for now, but none of them felt safe. The drones were gone, but their presence lingered like a shadow over the ship. Every creak of the metal, every flicker of the lights made them wonder if something unseen was still aboard. Worse yet, they knew the artifact's influence hadn't disappeared entirely. It was out there somewhere, waiting. Ryan called a meeting in the briefing room, gathering the team around the table. His face was pale, his eyes bloodshot from lack of sleep, but his voice was steady when he spoke. "We've got two problems," he began. "First, whoever sent those drones knows we're onto them. Second, that artifact, or whatever controls it, isn't done with us. If we want to stay alive, we need to figure out who's behind this and stop them before they come after us again." Laura nodded, pulling up schematics on the monitor. "The artifact is part of a network. I've traced faint signals emanating from it, leading to other locations across the galaxy. Each one seems to be connected to similar installations, outposts, or ruins containing fragments of alien tech." "Like the one we found on the moon?" Sam asked. "Exactly," Laura replied. "But these aren't just relics. They're nodes feeding energy into something bigger, a central hub. Whatever destroyed the White Star fleet might have been triggered by that hub." Daniel leaned forward, frowning. "So you're saying someone activated the network 30 years ago, causing the collapse, and now it's waking up again?" "That's my theory," Laura said grimly. "Whoever did it must have been powerful enough to cover their tracks, and ruthless enough to sacrifice entire fleets to keep it secret." Ryan clenched his fists, his frustration boiling over. If Central Command already knows about this, why send us in blind? Why not warn us about what we were walking into? "Because they don't trust us," Sam said quietly. "Or maybe because they didn't want anyone else finding out about it." The room fell silent as the weight of her words sank in. They weren't just fighting an unknown enemy. They were caught in the middle of a conspiracy that went all the way to the top. If they wanted answers, they'd have to find them themselves. Later that night, Laura stayed late in the lab, determined to crack the artifact's secrets. She replayed footage captured during their encounter with the drones, analyzing every detail. At first glance, the machines seemed simple, tools designed to disable ships and gather information. But as she dug deeper, she noticed patterns in their behavior. They weren't random. They were searching for something specific. "They targeted me," Laura realized aloud, rewinding the footage. "When I disabled the drone in the lab, the others focused on my location. It wasn't the ship they wanted. It was me." Her heart raced as she considered the implications. Was it because of her interaction with the artifact? Had she somehow marked herself as a threat? Or worse, had she become a target? Before she could think further, the lights flickered, plunging the lab, into darkness. Her breath caught in her throat as the hum of the ship's systems faded, replaced by an eerie silence. Then faintly she heard it, a low rhythmic tapping like a heartbeat. "Oh no," she whispered, backing away from the console. The blue glow of the artifact's energy seeped into the room, casting strange shadows on the walls. Symbols etched themselves onto the floor, pulsing in time with the sound. Laura grabbed her scanner, trying to pinpoint the source of the signal. But before she could act, the door slammed shut, trapping her inside. Panic set in as the temperature dropped sharply, making her breath visible in the cold air. "Ryan!" she shouted, pounding on the door. "Help!" On the bridge, Ryan heard her cry over the comms and bolted to his feet. "Laura, where are you?" "The lab," she replied, her voice trembling. "Something's happening, it's the artifact." Ryan sprinted toward the lab, Sam and Daniel close behind. When they arrived, the door refused to open, sealed tight, despite their efforts to pry it loose. Through the small window, they saw Laura standing frozen in the center of the room, surrounded by glowing symbols. "It's inside the ship," Daniel muttered, scanning the area with his toolkit. "Somehow it followed us." "We can't leave her in there," Sam said firmly, raising her rifle. Ryan hesitated, his mind racing. "Laura, listen to me. Stay calm. We'll get you out." "I don't think I can," Laura replied, her voice cracking. "It's doing something to me. I can feel it." As they watched helplessly, the artifact's energy surged, enveloping Laura in a blinding light. Her body stiffened, her eyes wide with terror as the symbols on the floor began to twist and writhe like living things. Then just as suddenly as it had started, the light faded, leaving her slumped on the floor. The door hissed open, and Ryan rushed inside, dropping to his knees beside her. "Laura, are you okay?" She blinked slowly, her gaze unfocused. I'm fine," she murmured, though her voice sounded distant. "But I saw something." "What did you see?" Ryan pressed. Laura sat up, rubbing her temples. "A message from the artifact. It's warning us." "Warning us about what?" Sam asked. Laura shook her head, struggling to remember. "It said, 'The hub awakens, and then they will come.'" "They?" Ryan repeated, his stomach sinking. "Who are they?" "I don't know," Laura admitted, "but whatever it is, it's coming for us." Back on the bridge, the crew debated their next move. Laura insisted they follow the artifact's signal to its source, the central hub mentioned in the message. Ryan agreed reluctantly, knowing it was their only chance to uncover the truth. But the journey wouldn't be easy. The coordinates led to a remote sector of space, far beyond the reach of friendly territory. If anything went wrong, they'd be completely alone. "We'll need to prepare," Daniel said, reviewing the ship's status. "Life support is holding steady, but the engines are still shaky. One wrong move and we could lose thrust. And we'll need weapons," Sam added. "Whatever's waiting for us won't go down without a fight." Ryan nodded, turning to Laura. "Can you track the signal while we travel? Keep us on course?" "Yes," she replied, though her expression remained troubled. "But, Captain, there's something else." "What is it?" Ryan asked. Laura hesitated, choosing her words carefully. "When the artifact touched me, I felt it, like it was reading my thoughts. I think it knows more than we do. Maybe even everything." Ryan stared at her, the implications sinking in. If the artifact truly understood their mission, their fears, their doubts, it meant they were playing right into its hands. But what choice did they have? Turning back wasn't an option. "Then let's make sure we stay one step ahead," Ryan said finally. "We find the hub, disable it, and end this once and for all." Days passed as the SS Horizon traveled deeper into uncharted space. The crew worked around the clock, repairing systems and preparing for the worst. Laura monitored the artifact's signal closely, noting subtle changes in its frequency. It was growing stronger, almost as if it were guiding them toward their destination. Finally, they reached the coordinates. Ahead of them loomed a massive structure, floating silently in the void. Its surface shimmered with the same iridescent glow as the drones, covered in intricate patterns that pulsed faintly with blue light. This was it, the central hub. Ryan addressed the crew over the intercom. "This is it, people. Whatever happens, next we stick together, no matter what." As the ship approached the hub, alarms blared suddenly, alerting them to incoming objects. Dozens of drones emerged from the structure, surrounding the horizon like a swarm of insects. Unlike the ones they'd faced before, these were larger, more advanced, their movements fluid and deliberate. "They're faster this time," Daniel warned, analyzing their trajectory. "And smarter." "Prepare for impact," Ryan ordered, gripping the controls tightly. "Laura, you ready?" "As I'll ever be," she replied, clutching her scanner. "Let's finish this." The ship shuddered as the drones attacked, breaching the hull in multiple places. Ryan guided the horizon closer to the hub, determined to reach it despite the odds. Inside, the crew fought desperately to hold their ground, repelling waves of drones as they closed in on their goal. Finally, they breached the hub's outer defenses, docking with a massive airlock. Ryan led a team, including Laura, Daniel, and Sam, onto the structure, stepping cautiously into the unknown. The interior was vast and labyrinthine, filled with alien machinery that hummed softly in the darkness. Symbols glowed on the walls, shifting and rearranging themselves as they moved deeper inside. "This place feels alive," Sam muttered, her rifle raised. "It is," Laura replied, her voice barely above a whisper. "The artifact's energy. It's everywhere." Ahead of them, a massive chamber opened up, dominated by a towering construct at its center. It was the source of the signal, radiating power so intense it made their skin tingle. Surrounding, it were dozens of drones, their glowing eyes fixed on the intruders. "There's no turning back now," Ryan said, drawing his weapon. "Let's take it down." The team moved cautiously into the massive chamber, their footsteps echoing against the smooth metallic walls. The air was thick with a strange energy that made their hair stand on end and their skin prickle. At the center of the room stood the towering construct, a pulsating mass of alien technology intertwined with organic material. Its surface shimmered with blue light, casting eerie shadows across the chamber. Surrounding it were dozens of drones, their glowing eyes fixed on the intruders. Ryan held up his hand, signaling the group to stop. "We need a plan," he whispered, his voice barely audible over the hum of the construct. "These things are smarter than the ones we faced before." Laura scanned the room with her device, analyzing the construct's energy signature. "It's feeding off the network," she said urgently. "If we can disrupt its core, we might be able to shut it down." "But how?" Sam asked, gripping her rifle tightly. "It's surrounded by those drones." Daniel stepped forward, examining the nearest drone. "They're linked to the construct. If we sever the connection, they'll lose power." "Sever? It how?" Ryan pressed. "I'll need time to rig something," Daniel replied. "A feedback loop, something to overload the system." "Then do it," Ryan ordered. "We'll cover you." As Daniel knelt beside a console near the entrance, Laura moved closer to the construct, her scanner in hand. She studied the patterns etched into its surface, searching for a weak point. The symbols shifted constantly, almost as if the machine was alive and aware of her presence. "This thing, it's learning," Laura muttered under her breath. "It knows we're here." "Stay focused," Ryan reminded her sharply. He turned to Sam. "Keep an eye on the drones. They're bound to attack any second." No sooner had he spoken than the drones sprang into action, moving with unnatural speed toward the group. Ryan fired his weapon, taking out 2 of them, but more quickly filled the gap. Sam joined him, her shots precise and steady, while Laura ducked behind a piece of debris to avoid being hit. "Hurry up, Daniel," Ryan shouted, reloading his weapon. "Almost there," Daniel called back, his fingers flying across the console. Sparks flew as he rewired circuits, creating a makeshift EMP device designed to target the construct's core. Meanwhile, Laura noticed something unusual about the construct. Along its base, faint lines of text appeared, symbols she recognized. From the artifact on the moon. They weren't random. They formed a pattern, one she'd seen before in the logs recovered from the outpost. "It's a failsafe," she exclaimed, pointing at the construct. "There's a way to disable it manually." "How?" Ryan demanded, firing another shot. Laura hesitated, her mind racing. "I don't know yet, but if I can get close enough—" "No," Ryan interrupted, firmly. "You're not going anywhere near that thing. We stick to the plan." Before Laura could argue, the drones advanced again, forcing the team to retreat further into the chamber. Daniel worked frantically, sweat dripping down his face, as he completed the final connections. "Done!" he yelled, pressing a button on the device. A surge of energy rippled outward, engulfing the drones and causing them to collapse in unison. For a moment, the construct faltered, its glow dimming slightly. Then, with a deafening roar, it surged, back to life, brighter and more powerful than before. "It didn't work," Daniel admitted, frustration evident in his voice. "It absorbed the energy instead of shutting down." "We've got company," Sam warned, raising her rifle as more drones emerged from hidden alcoves in the walls. This time they were larger, more menacing, their movements fluid and deliberate. Ryan cursed under his breath. "We're running out of options." Laura stepped forward, determination written across her face. "Let me try. I can figure out the failsafe. I just need a few seconds." "Absolutely not," Ryan snapped. "It's too dangerous." "And what's your alternative?" Laura countered. "Let this thing destroy us, destroy everything?" Ryan hesitated, torn between his duty to protect his crew and the realization that Laura might be their only hope. Finally, he nodded reluctantly. "Fine, but we're covering you." With Ryan and Sam providing cover fire, Laura sprinted toward the construct, dodging blasts from the drones. She reached the base and began deciphering the symbols, her hands trembling as she entered commands into her scanner. The construct responded violently, shaking the ground beneath their feet and sending waves of energy coursing through the chamber. "I'm in!" Laura shouted, typing furiously. "But it's fighting back. Hold on," Ryan yelled, emptying his magazine into the nearest drone. "Just a little longer." The construct pulsed erratically, its light flickering as Laura worked. Suddenly, the symbols on its surface froze, and a deep, resonant hum filled the air. The drones stopped moving, their glowing eyes dimming as the construct's power drained away. "It's working!" Laura cried triumphantly. "I've triggered the shutdown sequence." But before anyone could celebrate, the construct let out a final, ear-splitting screech. A burst of energy erupted from its core, throwing everyone backward. When the dust settled, the construct was silent, its once brilliant surface now dull and lifeless. Back aboard the SS Horizon, the crew regrouped, battered but alive. The hub's destruction had disabled the network, cutting off the artifact's influence. For the first time in days, they felt a glimmer of hope. "That should buy us some time," Laura said, reviewing the data collected during their mission. "But whoever activated the network is still out there, and they won't stop until they finish what they started." Ryan nodded grimly. "Then we'll stop them first. But not like this. Not blindly following orders from people who don't. Have our backs." He turned to the others. "We've uncovered the truth about the collapse. Now it's up to us to decide what to do with it. Do we report it to Central Command and risk them covering it up again? Or do we take matters into our own hands?" Sam spoke first. "If we tell them, we're putting ourselves in even more danger. They might silence us, or worse." "And if we don't?" Daniel asked. "What happens when someone else finds another node, another hub?" Laura looked at Ryan, her expression resolute. "We expose the conspiracy, not to everyone, just to those who deserve to know, people who can help us fight back." Ryan took a deep breath, considering her words. Finally, he nodded. "All right, we gather evidence, build a case, and find allies we can trust. But we move carefully. One wrong step and we're dead." As the Horizon drifted through space, the weight of their decision hung heavy in the air. They had survived the horrors of the artifact and the hub, but their journey was far from over. The collapse had been a lie, a betrayal orchestrated by those in power. And now, Ryan and his crew were determined to make sure the truth saw the light of day. Unbeknownst to them, however, The artifact's energy still lingered, faint but persistent, buried deep within the ship's systems. It waited patiently, biding its time, ready to awaken once more when the moment was right.